Here's part 2 of Vengeful Creditor. The difference is pretty sharp. That's why mobs riot. Few people said, "Hear, hear!" Others just let out exhalations of grief and agreement. Mr. Emneke, who had an unrestrainable admiration for the finance minister, had been nodding like a lizard through his speech, shouted, "Hear, hear!" too loud, and got a scorching look from the Prime Minister. A few desultory speeches followed, and the government took its decision not to abolish free primary education, but suspend it until the relevant factors had been thoroughly examined. One little girl of 10, named Veronica, was broken-hearted. She had come to love school as an escape from the drabness and arduous demands of home. Her mother, a near-destitute widow, who spent all hours of the day in the farm and, on market days in the market, left Vero to carry the burden of caring for the younger children. Actually, only the youngest, aged 1, needed much looking after. The other 2, aged 7 and 4, being old enough to fend for themselves, picking palm kernels and catching grasshoppers to eat were no problem at all to Vero. But Mary was different. She cried a lot even after she had been fed mid-morning foo-foo and soup saved for her, with a little addition of water to the soup, from breakfast, which was itself a diluted leftover from last night's supper. Mary could not manage palm kernels on her own yet, so Vero half-chewed them first before passing them on to her. But even after the food and the kernels and the grasshoppers and the bowls of water, Mary was rarely satisfied, even though her belly would be big and tight like a drum and shine like a mirror. Their widowed mother, Martha, was a hard-luck woman. She had an auspicious beginning long ago as a pioneer pupil at St. Monica's, then newly founded by white women missionaries to train the future wives of native evangelicalists. Most of her schoolmates of those days had married young teachers and were now wives of pastors, and 1 or 2 even of bishops. But Martha, encouraged by her teacher, Miss Robinson, had married a young carpenter trained by white artisan missionaries at the Onesia Industrial Mission, a trade school founded in the fervent belief that if the black man was to be redeemed, he needed to learn the Bible alongside manual skills. Miss Robinson was very keen on the industrial mission, whose principal herself later married. But in spite of the bright hopes of those early evangelical days, carpentry never developed much in the way of teaching, and clerical jobs were to develop. So when Martha's husband died, or, as those missionary artisans who taught him long ago might have put it, when he was called to higher service in the heavenly mansions by him who was himself once a carpenter on earth, he left her in complete ruins. It had been a bad luck marriage from the start. To begin, she had had to wait 20 whole years after their marriage for her first child to be born, so that now she was virtually an old woman with little children to care for and little strength left for her task. Not that she was bitter about that. She was simply overjoyed that God in his mercy had lifted her curse of barrenness to feel the need to grumble. What she nearly did grumble about was the disease that struck her husband and paralyzed his right arm for 5 years before his death. It was a trial too heavy and unfair. Soon after Vera withdrew from school, Mr. Mark Emneke, the big government man of their village, who lived in the capital, called on Martha. His Mercedes 220S pulled up on the side of the main road, and he walked the 500 yards or so of a narrow, unmotorable path to the widow's hut. Martha was perplexed at the visit of such a great man that she bustled about for cola nut she kept wondering. Soon the great man himself, in the hurried style of modern people, cleared up the mystery. "We have been looking for a girl to take care of our new baby, and today someone told me to inquire about your girl." At first Martha was reluctant, but when the great man offered her £5 for the girl's service in the first year, plus feeding and clothing and other things, she began to soften. "Of course it is not the money I'm concerned about," she said, "but whether my daughter will be well cared for." "You don't have to worry about that, Ma. She will be treated just like one of our own children. My wife is a social welfare officer, and she knows what it means to care for children. Your daughter will be happy in our home, and I can tell you that. She will be required to do what all she will be required to do is carry the little baby and give it its milk while my wife is away at the office and the older children are at school. Vera and her sister Joy were also at school last term, said Martha, without knowing why she said it. Yes, I know. That thing the government did is bad, very bad. But my belief is that a child who will be somebody, whether he goes to school or not. It is all written here in the palm of the hand. Martha gazed steadily at the floor, and then spoke without raising her eyes. When I married, I said to myself, my daughters will do better than I did. I read Standard 3 in those days, and I said they will all go to college. Now they will not have even the little I had 30 years ago. When I think of it, my heart wants to burst. Ma, don't let it trouble you too much. As I said before, what any one of us is going to be is all written here, no matter what the difficulties. Yes, I pray God that what is written for these children will be better than what He wrote for me and my husband. Amen. And as for this girl, if she is obedient and is good in my house, what stops my wife and me sending her to school when the baby is big enough to go out about on his own? Nothing. And she is still a small girl. How old is she? She's 10. You see, she's only a baby. There is plenty of time for her to go to school. He knew that the part about sending her to school was only a manner of speaking. And Martha knew too. But Vera, who had been listening to everything from a dark corner in the adjoining room, did not. She actually worked out in her mind the time it would take the baby to go about on his own, and it came out quite short. So she went happily to live in the capital in a great man's family, and looked after a baby who would soon be big enough to go about on his own. Then she would have a chance to go to school. Vera was a good girl and very sharp. Mr. Emneke and his wife were pleased with her. She had the sense of a girl twice her age, and was amazingly quick to learn. Mrs. Emneke, who was almost turned sour over her recent difficulty in getting good servants, was now her old self again. She could now laugh about the fiasco of free primado. She told her friends that now she could go anywhere and stay as long as she liked without worrying about her little man. She was so happy with Vera's work and manners that she affectionately nicknamed her Little Madame. The nightmare of the months following Abigail's departure was mercifully at an end. She had sought high and low then for another baby nurse, and just couldn't find one. One rather overripe young lady had presented herself and asked for £7 a month. But it wasn't just the money. It was her general air, a kind of labor exchange attitude which knew all the rights in the labor code, including, presumably, the right to have abortions in your servants' quarters, and even have a go at your husband. Not that Mark was that way, but the girl just wasn't right. After her, no other person had turned up until now. Every morning, as the older Emneke children, 3 girls and a boy, were leaving for school in their father's Mercedes or their mother's little noisy Fiat, Vera would bring the baby out to the steps and say bye-bye. She liked their fine dresses and shoes. She'd never worn any shoes in her life, but what she envied them the most was simply the going away every morning, going away from home, from familiar things and tasks. In the first months this envy was very, very mild. It lay beneath the joy of the big going away from the village, from her mother's drab hut, from eating palm kernels that twisted the intestines at midday, from the bitter leaf soup without fish. That going away was something enormous. But as the months passed, the hunger grew for these little daily departures in fine dresses and shoes and sandwiches and biscuits wrapped in beautiful paper napkins and the dainty little school bags. One morning, as the Fiat took the children away and little Gotty began to cry on Vera's back, a song sprang into her mind to quiet him. Little noisy motor car, if you're going to the school, please carry me, pee 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 po po po. All morning she sang her little song and was pleased with it. When Mr. Emneke dropped the other children at home at 1 o'clock and took off again, Vera taught them her new song. They all liked it, and for days it supplanted Baa Baa Black Sheep and Simple Simon and the other songs that they brought home from school. The girl is a genius, said Mr. Emneke, when the new song finally got to him. His wife heard it first and nearly died from laughter. She had called Vera and said to her, "So you make fun of my car, naughty girl?" Vera was happy because she saw not anger but laughter in the woman's eyes. "She is a genius," said her husband, "and she hasn't been to school. And besides, she knows you ought to buy me a new car." "Never mind, dear. Another year and you can have that sports car." "Not so." "So you don't believe me? Just you wait and see." More weeks and months passed by, and little Gotty was beginning to say a few words, but still no one spoke about Vera's going to school. She decided it was Gotty's fault, that he wasn't growing fast enough, and he was becoming rather too fond of riding on her back, even though he could walk perfectly well. In fact, his favorite words were "carry me," and Vera made a song about that too, and it showed her mounting impatience. Carry you, every time I carry you. If you no one grow again, I must leave and go school, because Vera done tire done tire. She sang it all morning until the other children returned from school, and then she stopped. She only sang this one when she was alone with Gotty. One afternoon, Mrs. Enrique returned from work and noticed a redness on Vera's lips. "Come here," she said, thinking of her expensive lipstick. "What is that?" It turned out, however, not to be lipstick at all, only her husband's red ink. She couldn't help a smile then. "And look at her fingernails and toes too. So, little madame, that's what you do when we go out and leave you at home to mind the baby? You dump him somewhere and paint yourself? Don't ever let me catch you with that kind of nonsense again. Do you hear?" It occurred to her to strengthen her warning somehow, if only to neutralize the smile she had smiled at the beginning. "Do you know that red ink is poisonous? You want to kill yourself? Well, little lady, you have to wait till you leave my house and return to your mother." That did it, she thought in glowing self-satisfaction. She could see that Vera was suitably frightened. Throughout the rest of the afternoon she walked about like a shadow. When Mr. Enrique came home, she told him the story as he ate a late lunch. And she called Vera for him to see. "Show him your fingernails," she said, "and your toes, little madame." "I see," said waving Vera over. "She is learning fast. Do you know the proverb which says that when mother cow chews giant grass, her little calves wash her mouth?" "It was a cow, you rhinoceros." "It's only a proverb, my dear." A week or so later, Mrs. Enrique, just home from work, noticed that the dress she had put the baby in the morning had been changed into something much too warm. "What happened to the dress I put on him?" He fell down and soiled it, so I changed him," said Vera, and there was something very strange in her manner. Mrs. Enrique's first thought was that the child must have had a bad fall. "Where did he fall?" she asked in alarm. Where did he hit on the ground? Bring him to me. What is all this? Blood? No, what is it? My God has killed me. Go and bring me the dress at once." "I washed it," said Vera, beginning to cry, a thing she never had done before. Mrs. Enrique rushed out to the line and brought down the blue dress and the white vest, were both stained red. She seized Vera and beat her in a mad frenzy with both hands. Then she got a whip and broke it out on her face, and arms ran with blood. Only then did Vera admit making the child drink a bottle of red ink. Mrs. Enrique collapsed into a chair and began to cry. Mr. Enrique did not wait to have lunch. They bundled Vera into the Mercedes and drove her to the 40 miles to her mother in the village. He had wanted to go alone, but his wife insisted on coming and taking the baby too. He stopped on the main road as usual, but he didn't go in with the girl. He just opened the door of the car, pulled her out, and his wife threw her little bundle of clothes after her, and they drove away again. All right, we'll finish up in part 3.